right, hello and welcome to another episode of the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. As always, brought to you by Keats Barbershop, located in East Rochester, PA. I am your host, Smitty. With me, as always, Drew, Joe. What is going on, fellas?
What's up,
What's
brother?
happening?
I also want to say I feel like we're in a little bit of a different setup. I think normally Joe and Drew are switched where they're at, but Joe switched the camera he was using. So then because he was the last enter, he's now at the bottom of the screen. So I was a little bit thrown off by that at first when I took a look.
It's the
But either way.
it's the live power rankings of how we're doing at like being hosts.
Whoever has the worst only fantasy subscription from now on is going to be at the bottom of the screen.
If that's how it's gonna be, we probably should do this.
Fair
been
enough.
tough out here.
Fair enough.
I subscribe to trash. I'm a trashy human. It happens.
Listen, I will say you have both of our endorsements for this week. We think that you're going to turn it around starting this week. So
Thank you. I need a win in my life.
but as always, we appreciate everybody tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe if this is your first time listening or watching the show. It's on any platform, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you can get the podcast. Appreciate you tuning in. Leave us a like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a 5-star review, all that good stuff. If you're tuning in for the live stream of this, you can ask just comments in YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter, you won't be able to do that. The comments, it will look like you're able to type and send to us. They will not come through. We won't see them. So head over to YouTube and type them in the chat. Twitch, we're on there as well. We've been getting some more traction on Twitch, which is cool. As always, until we get some comments in here with some questions, we're just going to go through some injury updates, and that starts with you, Drew. Going through his paperwork right now. 2 wins away for a Phillies World Series.
Drew is also the only person in America that still has a fax machine in their home.
It's a printer.
And DVD player.
Yeah, you got a VHS somewhere down there? Or?
Nah, I do have an Atari though.
Okay, that's fine though. That's fire.
This is a printer. Just happens to fax. It's just not set up.
All right.
I'll start with Cooper Kupp. Suffered a sprained ankle in garbage time, which made Sean McVay look like a complete bozo. But expectations that he's going to play, but obviously you just got to watch him the rest of the week. But big injury there, Cooper Kupp. Hopefully, doesn't linger long term.
Yeah. So, are you worried about it? Even though McVay is saying the right things about it. Like, did you see the injury at all? Like, what's your thought on it? Actually,
I actually didn't see it. Did you guys see it?
Yeah, it was like the last minute of the game, ankle kind of thing.
It didn't sound like it was bad. So did.
No, they said that he avoided any major like damage and that there was just like swelling. So I think with the technology that they have for these guys and all the different medicines and stuff,
I guess it's just hard for me. Like anything that a coach says, I guess I'm kind of taking with a grain of salt, especially until you see like I don't know how McVay typically is with injuries.
Yeah, they specifically said it was tissue swelling, which feels like a weird way to talk about it. I've never heard them be that specific, but
just swelling.
Yeah,
gotcha.
So I think he's gonna be fine though. I don't think it was that serious. But like, why would you have him in the last minute of the game there when he's literally the only person that they throw to?
He's the only player on their team that's good, honestly, right now. Well, on offense, of course.
Yeah, fair.
Go ahead.
Mark Andrews, dealing with a shoulder injury as well as that ankle injury that he was worried about for a few weeks there too. Saints this week, and then they actually have their bye, so they said that he's going to play, but I'm still watching it just in case they decide to just hold him out for 1 week ahead of
I don't know if he plays, honestly. I have this,
they have the extra day, right?
Yeah.
Which is like the worst spot to be in, where it's like if you have Andrews, I think that you need to priority add likely because he's going to get the work. He's shown in the preseason and in the regular season that when Mark Andrews misses time, that he's able to be more than serviceable given the state of tight ends right now. I think that if you have Andrews, he's somebody that you have to have. I actually ranked lightly this week in my tight end rankings and didn't rank Andrews with the expectation that he's not going to play. But if Andrews is in the lineup, you have to throw him in there. I know last week some people were a little bit disappointed. He only had 6 points and some change in PPR, but I mean, that was still better than most of the tight ends that you threw out there anyway. So if he's playing, you got to give it the benefit of the doubt. But it is interesting that it's a new injury that surfaced. It wasn't something that was re-aggravated from the ankle previously. But it's a weird spot. I wouldn't play him if I was them. The AFC North is dog water, and it's like that's your guy. Give him the bye week to rest up. Likely can definitely handle it, and you'll be fine.
I'm a big fan of what we've seen Likely do, which is funny because I remember Drew asked me about him. I think he had already been drafted. He was already drafted, but it wasn't for the draft, right? I think we were talking about a dynasty league.
Like, I was just like, I saw where he went, and I was like, I liked Coastal Carolina. I took a flyer on him a lot of dynasty leagues and just have him sitting in my taxi. I actually ranked Andrews and Likely, I believe, or I meant to, because even with Andrews playing potentially with Rashad Bateman, who's gonna be out for a few weeks, which was the next guy on the list, with a foot injury, which potentially sounds like it's a Liz Frank injury because they did finally describe it as a midfoot, and it's been something that's been lingering with him all year. It's concerning. I wouldn't be shocked if maybe he missed significant time, and he might not even be available before fantasy playoffs.
Yeah.
So
we might see a lot more of both tight ends with that being the case. But I picked up Likely in the league that I have Andrews for the reason that Joe is saying. Joe, you had Likely as tight end 8 in your rankings. And honestly, if Andrews doesn't go, I think that's pretty likely that Isaiah would finish in that rank.
He'd finish higher, so it wouldn't be likely.
He's swayed me. I'm actually a big fan of his game. It's just watching him at Coastal Carolina, it didn't seem like there was anything that he did that was like stood out. Like he didn't have like that one really elite trait. But
I just thought he was
really good for the Ravens.
I just thought he was like a really good receiver. I don't know, maybe just not flashy, but like he's solid.
I didn't have any idea who he was until he had that big preseason game. So props to you guys.
The one that's gonna really upset me. Go ahead, Drew. Next on the list.
It's like Keenan Allen.
It is Keenan Allen. Retire.
Keenan Allen is back.
Hamstring. I mean, what can you say? We've been talking about this all year. Brandon Staley just
never went on IR, by the way. 7 weeks from this now.
They said that it's his hamstring isn't responding the way that they had hoped, but typically that's how it is when you're north of 30. So unfortunately, it sounds like he's going to be missing another week.
Yeah, and they said that he's not going to play on a snap count just to test it out. Either it's going to be like I'm playing or I'm not. So it's pretty frustrating, especially if you drafted him, third round, maybe even the second.
Yeah.
That entire offense, other than Eckler, is just absolutely depleted. I mean, you got Herbert that's already banged up with the ribs. I'm sure that's not all that healthy. Mike Williams just went out. You have Keenan Allen not looking to really be all that serviceable at all. They're really down to not a whole lot. I was surprised that they didn't make a move for a receiver at the deadline, given all the movement that was available. But I guess they're just going to let it rock. It was a bit of a surprise to me.
Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, them and no one really talked about them. I feel like not making a move for a receiver because all eyes were kind of on the Packers.
Right.
They didn't do anything. But you look at Mike Williams out multiple weeks. They haven't had Keenan Allen for 7. I mean, they're relying a lot on DeAndre Carter and Josh Palmer going forward.
I think Brandon Cooks is still going to be out of Houston soon.
He can't.
That's way out.
Isn't the deadline passed?
They can waive him.
He can get waived.
To be released.
It's like tweeting, and there's potentially he's not playing this week, and it's over being disgruntled.
Well, they play tomorrow. So,
and there's talk that he's not going to play. So
sounds like he's really evolving into the wide receiver 1 that we always wanted him to be.
Yeah, he's got the mindset now to go along with the production.
That's right.
And the last one, which was kind of, one of those Wednesday things, I guess, but you think this is a little bit more serious than just that, and you think he's not going to play again.
DeAndre Swift. Yeah, so Dan Campbell essentially said that they felt like they rushed him back too soon and that he didn't respond well after the game last week. He has the shoulder injury, and I guess he has an ankle injury as well, but they're more concerned about the shoulder. And this is something we talked about when he got hurt earlier this season. I felt like this would be concerning because it's kind of like his play style, and he's had several shoulder injuries over the last few years. So it's going to continue to be a thing. Hopefully he's back sooner rather than later, but it sounds like he's probably going to miss again.
And it's crazy too, because it's like they're not really in a place where they're going to be competing. So, like, is there a point where you think that they could shut him down for the season to preserve him? I know that was kind of like thrown around at the end of last year too, and it didn't happen. But at what point do you just say, all right, like, we're going to wait for the future and kind of go from there?
I think it depends on if Dan Campbell feels heated with his position. If he thinks he's going to get fired, he'll probably bring him out there, which is incredibly selfish. But if he's trying to save his job, he's going to put the best players on the field that he can.
Yeah, and to your point, he first injured his shoulder in 2019 while he was still in school. They didn't specify what it was, but it was a shoulder injury. 2021 had the AC joint sprain, and then again this September with that AC joint sprain. So
we've actually talked about that weeks ago on this show, I think, when it first happened, because Drew remembered that the shoulder was something that he dealt with in the past. Yeah. So, yeah. I'm a huge fan of Swift's game, but this isn't good with how many games that he's missed already in his short career.
It's a trend for sure.
And it's interesting because he's avoided surgery every time, but it seems like he tends to re-aggravate it continuously.
Yeah, well, maybe stop avoiding the surgery then and see if long-term it can do something for you.
I'm not sure if it's ever significant enough where you would need to get a surgery. I think that's the problem. When you're getting an AC joint sprain and it's not like a tear of your labrum or anything.
You know what? Maybe just purposefully tear your labrum, get the surgery, and then see how that impacts things going forward.
Ask Dalvin Cook how he does that week back and then figure out next step.
I don't know, man. This is crazy. There was nothing else to add then, injury-wise?
No.
You're not worried about any of these like weird Wednesday ones? Like I know Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry.
That one I am worried about.
Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, which I was going to cover that during Tinder, but
okay. We can wait.
It seems like it's significant because he's just looking at his play. He just doesn't look.
They shipped out Nyheim Hines behind him, so. Yeah.
I've been holding on to Deion Jackson in Dynasty because he looked good when he had the opportunity too. So
yeah,
he had a matchup this week though for sure. I don't know if I would feel too great about him playing. I don't feel too great about
Jonathan Taylor.
All right,
Jonathan Taylor again.
What if you were in a situation where both of your starting running backs are on a bye?
Good luck.
Taysom Hill.
Can't play him as a running back, but all right, yeah. So what about some other headlines maybe then that don't involve injuries? I mean, this would probably be a good week to talk about this stuff with the most trade activity we've seen in the league in 30 years.
Yeah, how crazy was that? I really thought it was a lot of hot air being blown around, and then all of a sudden it was like deal, and it was just relentless nonstop, which is fun. I think it was, as fans, is exciting. It's got to be miserable as players, like you're just sitting around, like your name's getting brought up in discussions. Almost maybe even a relief once it's done, and like you just know that you're on this new team or whatever.
I think that the NFL players, more so than baseball or anything or hockey, I think that the football players know when they're probably going to get shipped out, because I get that inkling based on like Claypool's tweets and like the pictures that he was posting. Like he tweeted it was like his last day and they were like taking photos. I feel like he knew going into the day that he was going to be traded, and it was just one of those things about where. And I think the trade deadline is going to be more significant year over year, because I was reading about it. A lot of teams are looking at what the Rams did last year and their ability to just sell off picks and then move through the playoffs. Their teams are valuing better chance at like going all in more so than building through the draft now.
Yeah.
I just want to say something real quick. This is not something that I would normally talk about on the fantasy show. It's more of like an around the 412 thing with Tyler and I. But to your point about Claypool, I think after the game against Philly, he knew that if the Steelers could get a second round pick, that he was gone.
Yeah, I think that he knew.
Because, I mean, that goes back to what I was told back in March. You know, if the Steelers could have gotten a second round pick this offseason, they would have done it. No one was willing to cough it up at the time. And not only just a second round pick, what's projected to be a pretty high second round pick because of where Chicago is.
Higher pick than what he was picked at.
Yeah. Yep. So it's just, it's a weird, trade, but at the same time, I think that the Steelers got pretty good value there, and obviously best of luck to Chase there. We do finally have a question here. Hi, loving, in all caps, the stream. My team, Kirk Cousins, Eckler, Henry, Devontae, D-Hop, Metcalf, Taysom Hill. I have the option of trading D-Hop for Chubb. Should I do it? They're 6-2, and it's a PPR league.
I had a crazy thought, but I need to think about it before I say it out loud or before I
Oh boy.
say that you should do this instead. But my immediate gut reaction without doing any research, I would rather trade Devontae Adams than DeAndre Hopkins right now. If I could do the same deal, but with Devontae, just seeing the target share that Hopkins is getting and just the way that the injuries are unfolding in Arizona.
I'm eating crow.
Yeah.
I am too. And it's like that offense is struggling. I think they have a better matchup this week. So tough
He
to say.
subtweeted us.
Yeah, he did. He did.
That was I'm taking it. I'm thinking that's about me. It had to be. He saw what I said.
I was worried about his injuries.
Yeah.
But more so, I felt like he wasn't going to get the volume because I thought Hollywood was going to be good. And then, like, when he went down that week, I was just like, I think that Hopkins is going to be crazy volume, and that's what it ended up being.
That's true. We can rely on that. This wouldn't have happened if Hollywood didn't get hurt.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to tweet him saying that. D-Hop for Chubb, though. Drew, did you say what you felt about this? I know what Joe said. That's a little bit of a...
I wouldn't trade Hopkins.
Okay.
The volume that he's getting is just like wide.
Well, I mean, the thing is too, they have Eckler and Henry as their running backs.
Exactly.
Like,
I would. So I'm gonna pull something up real quick, which we've looked at a bajillion times. But this is the
peaked in high school
trade charts. So this guy started on Reddit. He's now on 4 for 4. And essentially he builds. I'm gonna hide the comment real quick just so we can see the chart a little bit better.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So pretty much what it does is that for your different settings, he outlines what is kind of like the live expectation of what you're getting for a player. So we can see that DeAndre Hopkins has moved tremendously. So if you look at last week's data, he was valued at 24.5. So he was in a tier with like Devonta Smith, Gabe Davis, DK Metcalf, stuff like that. Jamar Chase, because of the injury, we've seen a big reduction in what that value is because we don't know if or when he's going to come back based on the severity of the injury. But he's immediately moved into the second tier with guys like Devonta Adams, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle. To me, just seeing what Hopkins has done in the 2 weeks that he's been there, it may be a little bit of an overreaction, but it seems like he's going to be force-fed the ball. And Devonta Adams is in a struggling offense, and we can't figure out what really the deal is there. If I'm able to get Chubb and move someone that's in a lower tier, absolutely I can do it. I do like the fact that you can always having that third running back option, even if you're not necessarily going to use them in a flex and full PPR is great. But also knowing that you're only a couple weeks away from getting Deshaun Watson back, which even if he doesn't play as well as Jacoby Brissett, I think that people will respect the pass a little bit more in terms of how they're game planning. So to me, I'm keeping Hopkins. I'm getting rid of Adams. If I can't get that trade swung, I'd still probably make the trade. You're selling high on Hopkins, and he might return to earth a little bit. But I think that that's an easy win to take who's arguably been the best running back in football right now. In fantasy, it seems like a no-brainer to me.
Even if so that would mean they have, obviously, I'm assuming they play a flex as well, so that's great, Eckler, Henry, Chubb. But then that makes, Devontae or D-Hop, whichever one you don't trade, and DK Metcalf, the two receivers.
Right.
Do we think that Derek Carr is going to get better? I think that's the thing. I was looking at some of his advanced stats, and he's barely cracking the top 30 in like any passing category. Like he's just not been good. Like,
yeah,
I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to be as bad again. I don't think another week as they were on Sunday. But I mean, Devontae Adams almost had his catch streak broken in that game.
And what's crazy is that Mac Hollins was the leading target getter for the team. When you have Devontae Adams, and you saw it week 1, they fed him the ball, good things happened. And
Adams
then for whatever,
last week,
I don't care. It's Devontae Adams.
I don't think he played much. I don't think it was a Michael Jordan flu game. I just don't think that he.
I mean, he played 42 snaps. He only had 28 routes run, but it was weird. And they gave him a carry too, which was super odd.
I don't know. I'm worried about Chubb long term yet because I think when Watson comes back, they're going to throw the ball more. I don't know if they're going to go to Kareem Hunt more now that he didn't get traded.
Also, that would have been great for Chubb if they would have traded him.
I don't know. I think that
not that it matters a whole lot, but
I don't think that from what we've seen from the way that Cleveland operates, and I say this because I watch every Browns game because I'm married to a Browns fan.
Sorry.
I know. Love you, Sarah. They don't change the way that they rotate their running backs regardless who's available to them. When Chubb's hurt, they put Johnson in the Chubb role. If Hunt's hurt, Johnson goes into the Chubb role, or into the Hunt role. Like, they have the two running back thing and they run it into the ground. It's just what they do. I'm not really worried about it. It's funny. I think that they've thrown the ball too much as it is. Will they throw it a little bit more? But honestly, I think Watson's going to suck ass. And I think they're going to have to rely on the game because he hasn't played in 2 years. Look how bad he looked in the preseason. I don't know if he can even Jacoby Brissett it this year. I don't, because then they'll get a good draft pick, but we'll see. I want them to miss it by like 1
I just
game.
want it to be a super long off season where all the talk is they shouldn't have made the trade.
Yeah, fair.
Who's going to get a good draft pick?
The Browns.
They're trading Houston.
Yeah, I know, but I don't want Houston to get better either.
But also, it still does matter though, because they'd still be picking higher in the second round than if they were good.
Yeah,
right.
In all the other rounds. But okay, yeah. So that's enough of that. Getting back to other headlines.
Yeah. So I mean, the big headline this week, you alluded to it earlier, Zach, was all of the different trades. So we just wanted to walk through some of the big trades that happened this week, and mostly just sticking to the ones that are fantasy relevant. First one we touched on a little bit. So Nyheim Hines goes to Buffalo, which is funny because James Cook had his best week of the year, I would say, last week, and then they're like, nah. We've always wanted a Nyheim Hines type guy, so why don't we just go and get him? Zach Moss actually went back in the other direction, so I'm assuming that he cleared his physical today. That's an interesting name to watch, I think, if Jonathan Taylor ends up being hurt for some time. I think that we'll see, but I don't know. I think that they would use Zach Moss first, potentially. But it's for a conditional 6th-round pick that becomes a 5th. It's really interesting. So the Buffalo Bills are the top-ranked passing offense, which I don't think is a surprise to y'all. But since 2018, so since Nyheim Hines came into the league, he is 5th in the league for running backs for most receiving yards. So you have Eckler 1, Kamara 2, McCaffrey 3, James White at 4, then Nyheim Hines. So he's had some splash games historically. Do you think that there's any relevancy to Nyheim Hines now he's in Buffalo? Do you think there's a role where he can kind of be like a James White and have some like flex play value, or do you think that Buffalo is not going to rely on the running back enough to make it worthwhile?
I don't think he's a fantasy option moving forward unless Devin Singletary gets hurt. I think he's just going to be a situational guy because Singletary's played so well. In my opinion, I think he looks good. If he could score more touchdowns, I think that he would be a top-end running back, but he just doesn't get in the end zone enough.
Yeah, I think from a real-life perspective, they're a better football team by adding a guy like this, but from a fantasy standpoint, I don't know that he impacts things much. The other thing to think about is when you talk about a guy switching teams like this, how quickly is he going to be able to pick up the new offense? Because Buffalo's offense also doesn't seem like the easiest offense for a new player to grasp coming in. I don't know that immediately he's going to make an impact. And by the time that he does, you could be in the fantasy football playoffs at that point. So
yeah, the only other thing I can think of is I would imagine that Nyheim Hines probably blocks better than James Cook. I don't know how Devin Singletary is as a blocker, but I know that's like for people that are third down backs, like that's what you have to be able to do to see the field. So not that Buffalo's offensive line has struggled, but if you've seen like the other top teams in the league, they were adding a lot of defense in the AFC. So it's like I'm sure they wanted somebody that they can throw back there when he's in the shotgun. Have that extra.
I mean, right in their own division with Miami getting Bradley Chubb.
Yeah.
So
we're all in.
Yeah. So I just traded Keenan for Higgins and Curtis Samuel with a new team.
Is that Rashad Higgins? Like how?
Slam dunk.
I mean, if that's T Higgins, why was another player included? Why'd the other person do this trade, let alone include another player?
Good for you.
Is it like a 10-point per injury league or something? What am I missing here?
Fleeced.
I love that. I'm proud of you. I'm gonna print that out and put that on my fridge actually, because that's so good.
It's T Higgins. Why was this trade done?
Fleeced.
Good for you. Is this a dynasty league? Because that'd be even more hilarious.
Please.
Madness. Okay.
Yeah.
So next player that was acquired, we had Jeff Wilson Jr. get shipped off to Miami. It's funny because it's been said many times by Kyle Shanahan that he absolutely loves Jeff Wilson, that he would never shop him around. I have to imagine that Wilson was like, oh, McCaffrey's here. Elijah Mitchell's coming back. Yeah, I want out. So it was kind of like this three-way love triangle where the Dolphins ultimately got Jeff Wilson Jr. Chase Edmonds gets shipped out to Denver. Denver's already said that Melvin Gordon is still going to be the starting running back moving forward. So I don't know what they're going to do with Chase Edmonds. I guess it gives them more of a passing option, but he has been quite arguably the worst runner in football this season. So I don't think that there's much to say about him. I wouldn't pick him up as like a fantasy.
How are you the worst running back in the NFL in a Mike McDaniel offense? This is why I picked this guy. I'm literally taking a shot at myself here. I picked this guy to be a top 15 fantasy football running back this year.
I mean, he's top 15, but it's just at the bottom 15.
You have to go in reverse.
Yeah. But
Good
do you guys
God.
think that – what do you think Jeff Wilson getting added to what is now becoming the San Francisco 49ers East running back room? Do you have any fears for like this impacting Mostert at all? Or how do you think this plays out?
You'll go first.
Well, I know how you feel. Obviously, the people don't, so you can tell them. But yeah, I have a little bit of a concern with what it will do for Mostert's workload. Not necessarily immediately, but it goes back to like I can think it's not as bad as the Buffalo thing because there is going to be familiarity with Jeff Wilson Jr. and a Mike McDaniel offense. Like he's going to know a little bit of what he wants to do offensively from the days in San Francisco.
Right.
But you look at how San Francisco ran their offense. Yeah, they like their running backs and they've always had multiple good guys. But Joe, you've kind of debunked the whole committee thing within the last couple years. Like Elijah Mitchell was the guy when he was there last year.
The committee left when Mike McDaniel left, and now it's going to become a committee in Miami. That's how I feel.
I don't think so. It's going to be interesting.
Feel it.
It's like Jeff Wilson Jr.'s actually had like a low-key like 6th season. He's averaging 5.1 yards per rush. He has 117 rushing yards over expected. Chase Edmonds this year, minus 100, by the way.
That's like what, 4th or 5th in the league?
Yeah, it's up there. So I think he provides a lot of value. I think it's really an insurance play because everybody knows that Raheem Mostert has that injury history. He's on a 1-year deal. I don't know if Wilson is how long his contract goes for. But I think it's just like an insurance thing where they need to have a running back that can do some stuff. I think Jeff Wilson will get his touches, but he's probably got like one of those like voodoo dolls and is probably like poking needles into the Raheem Mostert doll that he has trying to get his job back.
I think it's a committee because he's injury prone, Raheem Mostert. And I'm pretty sure Jeff Wilson is a free agent at the end of the year.
He is. Yep.
So he's playing for a contract. I think that the connection to Mike McDaniel, he knows who he is. He knows what he's getting. Raheem Mostert being injury prone, I think that it's going to be a committee. It might not be 50-50, but I think it's going to be 60-40 at least. I just feel like that's going to be the case.
Also, shout out to the Dolphins for turning the pick that became Trey Lance into Bradley Chubb and Tyreek Hill. That's just like phenomenal asset management.
Part of the Waddle trade as well, because
it all started with the bong mask of Laramie Tunsil.
Yeah, the trade tree there is absolutely ridiculous.
But love
awesome
to see
to
it.
look at.
And then last one, we won't get into this too much because we're going to talk about it very shortly. Well, I guess we'll just glance over this one, but Chase Claypool traded to Chicago for a 2nd-round pick. We discussed it at the top of the show. We'll discuss it a little bit later, just because that one has been a fierce debate amongst the three of us. So we'll save that for a little bit fun a little bit later. And then last but not least, TJ Hawkinson to Minnesota. Among tight ends this year, he is 1st in yards per reception and is 5th in receiving yards. Couple interesting stats for you. In 3.5 seasons, TJ Hawkinson has 7 career games with at least 80 yards. The Vikings have had a tight end have at least 80 yards 7 times since 2010. So this is a huge upgrade for them. I don't think the price was really that bad, but it's interesting seeing that he was a pretty high pick in the 1st round for a tight end and what they were able to get back for that.
Bush,
yeah, so it's very interesting. So 2 questions for you. Do you think that this helps or hurts Hawkinson's fantasy value? Personally, I think it's going to ding him a little bit because they don't really utilize him at all, and I think he's ultimately a better pass blocker than Irv Smith, so it'll be interesting to see how much they leverage that in the passing game. And two, Hawkinson was the number 2 target in Detroit, so who takes those targets now that he's gone?
This is completely off of like, we actually have to see it on the field first. Cause like initially my first thought is I would agree with you that they want to use him a lot more in blocking and he's not going to be running as many routes. And you also look at the other weapons in Minnesota, yada, yada, yada. He's going to, be knocked down a peg, but someone who covers the team was on Pat McAfee's show today to talk about the trade. And he said behind the scenes, there's been a lot of talk about between Kevin Connell and Kirk Cousins wanting to utilize the tight end more, especially in the red zone. So I want to see it happen more before I commit to saying that this is going to be a good thing for TJ Hawkinson. But just going based off of that, I know that obviously when you give up that type of capital too, like they want this to work out and they want him to be a feature.
And they're going to work out a long-term deal with him, it sounds like, too, if they haven't already.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think he stays the same because I'm with Zach. I think that they want to utilize the tight end, but of course you still have Justin Jefferson there. So I don't think he's going to get better. I don't think he's going to get worse. He's still going to be like a mid top 5 tight end.
So we have, somebody like Adam Thielen kind of lower in our top 30 rankings, not for this week specifically, but moving forward, is he really the guy that takes a hit?
It has to be one of the two of them.
Yeah.
I mean, and from the tight end perspective, you have to hold on to Hawkinson because who else are you going to pick up? But Thielen, I think he's been like a fringe player anyway. So to me, it's like I don't really feel comfortable having Thielen. He's not necessarily a drop candidate for me, but I don't feel great if he's in my starting lineup just because he's kind of TD dependent as well.
He's absolutely TD dependent. That's always been his thing. I feel like the last few years he would have boom weeks because he'd end up with 3 touchdowns because Kirk Cousins throws him the ball in the red zone a lot, but he's always been touchdown dependent. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, though, is going to destroy. Like
and I've got to imagine that Josh Reynolds is going to get an uptick in targets as well. I mean, you have DJ Chark that's been out for a while. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the backup tight ends that they have. They were people that I've never even heard of. One of them could potentially surface, but I'm not going to put any stock into it. But, yeah, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. All right, cool. It's Tinder time. Let's do this thing. So if you haven't watched the show before, each week we select 3 different profiles for the 3 of us to swipe on. And this is our fantasy football Tinder. So you'll see a template like this pop up onto the screen. If we're vibing the profile, we're going to swipe right and give it that green heart. If we're not really about that action, we're going to swipe left and give them the no, move on, see you later, sayonara. First profile that I've got for you guys. Is Jonathan Taylor a must start? Is he still a must start for you? He had a number 2 RB2 finish in week 1 against Houston, which has given up out of 5 of 7 games, have been a top 6 running back in 5 of those 7. In every other game, his best finish is RB23, which he's done twice. He's got the ankle injury battled up for him. He's got a new quarterback that runs the ball a little bit. If we look at the stats from last week, Ellinger ran 6 times, 3 of which were design runs, 3 of them were pull-down scrambles. But is Jonathan Taylor still a must start for you moving forward?
I have Jonathan Taylor. This is terrible because if you just showed me a blind resume without a name attached to it, no.
Exactly.
But like, there's no way that a roster that took Jonathan Taylor first overall has 2 other running backs that you can justify playing over him. So production wise, absolutely not. Maybe there's some hope there that changes. I mean, because the offensive line is not as bad as they've played. Instead of firing their offensive coordinator, they should have fired their offensive line coach.
But does their offensive coordinator even call the plays? I feel like Frank Reich is the one that does it. So then what does that guy even do? Like, that sounds like the best job ever.
I don't want to necessarily continue to mention Pat McAfee, even though I love Pat McAfee. I don't want to just like bite their information and resurface it on here. But what they were talking about on there, Darius Butler's on there, who was a former Colt as well. And they were talking to somebody, Zach Kiefer, who covers the Colts for The Athletic. And basically, like, him and Frank together would put together the game plan and everything like that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's Frank Reich calling the plays on Sundays. So there was also some conversations, and this is like completely galaxy brain on their part, where Frank Reich knew that he was going to be fired after the season.
Yeah.
And he's letting this offensive coordinator get a head start and looking for a new job as opposed to being canned at the end of the year. So there's some conversations there as well. And that's kind of like a conspiracy theory thing. But to answer this question, I'm completely going off topic now. I still got to start Jonathan Taylor. I can't not. So yeah.
It does depend on the roster construction, though. That's the thing. Like,
yeah, if you got lucky and hit on somebody, like I don't know who's like the guy this year that got picked up. Maybe like
that's what I was just gonna say.
Yeah,
or an ETN if you got them in like the mid rounds.
Yeah, but I'm saying like Ken Walker was available in free agency at one point, and like so I'm talking about like that type of guy. Like ETN was rostered, in every league. Ken Walker I was able to get in free agency. So I think if you landed in that spot, then maybe you do have two other running backs that are worth playing over Jonathan Taylor.
I think you have to look at the matchup every week, though. So I'm gonna swipe. Is it right that if he's not,
if you still would, if you think he's a must start, swipe right.
I don't think he's a must start.
Do you think he's a must start?
I think if you have issues where you have to start him, you obviously have to start him. But I think that you have to look at it week over week and whether or not he's a viable starter. I really do.
Yeah.
So I have Jonathan Taylor in a 12-man. My running backs are Jonathan Taylor, Donta Foreman, A.J. Dillon.
Foreman's another guy right there too.
Gus Edwards. So to me, it's like I have to play him just because it's like
I feel like Gus Edwards could still become something once we figure out what the heck's going on in that backfield because they've been switching back and forth. He has a soft tissue injury though too.
But the problem is he plays on Monday night, so it's like you don't know until it's too late. And if he doesn't, I don't really have a backup for it. So it's like
I'm just saying week over week. So like
sure, yeah.
This is season long question. I don't have any Jonathan Taylor shares. I could tell you that someone offered me a trade with Jonathan Taylor in it, and I declined it.
Yeah. To me, it's I don't see him he's not returning anywhere near the draft capital that he has. I think you're probably going to start him out of necessity, but not out of enjoyment. So it's going to be a no for me as well. Okay. So we had 2 no swipes, 1 yes swipe.
Not a very happy, yes.
No. And it was like I'm lonely.
This was like I've had 15 no's in a row.
How many Labatt Blues did you have? All right, so moving on to our next profile. We touched on this a little bit earlier. It's been a hot topic amongst the Around the 412 Fantasy Show crew.
And Twitter, apparently. I just read a bunch of tweets on it.
So Chase Claypool was traded to the Bears. Chase Claypool is averaging a career low 38.9 receiving yards per game. Big target, has legitimate star potential, which we saw in his rookie season. In the offseason, on I'm Athlete, he claimed that he was a top 3 receiver in the league. The Bears really needed a wide receiver too. Their number 2 currently was N'Keal Harry, who scored a touchdown against all odds last week. They also have Dante Pettis as a deep ball stash, but the Bears are getting Claypool. It's hopefully going to help Justin Fields. We've seen in other cases where young quarterbacks such as Tua Tagovailoa or Jalen Hurts, where they get a bona fide stud at wide receiver, it's been able to help them elevate their game. So do you think that Chase Claypool, or are you going to go crazy for him? Does he take that next step in Chicago that he was unable to do in Pittsburgh?
I'll go last.
Okay.
Let me go last because I know I'm the oddball, so let me go last.
Yeah, I mean, when you give up the type of capital that they did to get him, like we mentioned, it's going to be a high second-round pick as well. I think that they would like for him to be the featured guy. The thing is, though, you look at Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney fits the bill for what Justin Fields has utilized the best at Ohio State. That's kind of what I'm looking at, like a similar skill set to a Garrett Wilson, to a Chris Olave, where Justin Fields had the most success with. Granted, really he hasn't had this type of receiver when you talk about the traits that Chase Claypool brings to the table. And that's kind of the argument for me for what Chase Claypool is going to be in Chicago. When you look at Luke Getsy, what he had in Green Bay, I know a lot of people, including my friend Jacob Infante, who covers the Bears, they've been talking a lot about trying to find like an Allen Lazard type of guy that offers that inside-outside versatility. They feel like Chase Claypool is that type of a receiver. I think that obviously a little bit more upside than an Allen Lazard. But for me, it's hard to say because I don't know that we've been able to fairly evaluate Chase Claypool in Pittsburgh's offense. I don't think he's as productive as a player as we saw his rookie year. I also don't think he's as bad of a player as we've seen for the last season and a half. So what is Chase Claypool? I'm not totally sure, but I tend to still believe that Darnell Mooney is Justin Fields' number one option in the passing game.
I guess I'll chime in with this. I agree with Zach. So if we're looking, and to me, this isn't really a matter of like Claypool. It's what I feel about how the Bears are going to operate their offense and what they're going to do with Justin Fields. So if we look at the attempts per game that he has going into this season, he's averaging 19.9 passes per game. His high in attempts is 27. He usually is between like the 17 to 23 mark. The Bears are running the ball 60% of the time, and I don't think that's a reflection necessarily of the people that they have on offense. It's a reflection of how can we stay in the game. It's by running the ball, controlling the clock. When Fields does drop back, which is about 30 times a game, if he doesn't see something, he's probably going to run. From what I've seen in Fields this year, from the games that I've watched, is that he's very much I know what my read is before the play. I'm locked onto him, and no matter what happens, I'm either throwing it to that person or I'm running. And I don't think that there's going to be enough targets to go around for Chase to be relevant. Now, could this change? Will they maybe attempt to throw the ball a little bit more? Maybe. But in games where they've lost by 20-plus points, it's not like his attempts are there. Their game script is -4. So on average, they're down 4 points. And he only averages 3 deep ball attempts per game, which is kind of middle of the pack for the league. But they're last in the league in team pass plays per game. The protection rate isn't really there. They're in the bottom third of the league for that. And he's only averaging 150 yards per game. So from a fantasy perspective, I just don't see where Claypool can possibly take, like, it just hurts everybody in the offense. Maybe they get marginally better, but I know at the beginning of this season I said that there's no way that Tua can support Jalen Waddle and Tyreek, and I've eaten quite a bit of crow on that. But I don't think that Justin Fields has shown any ability to even or flashes that he can support one receiver, let alone 2.
Okay. I agree with everything you guys are saying, 100%. Like history shows that this isn't going to be anything. I'm more on, to your point, the Dolphins argument. I felt like history doesn't always repeat itself. And I thought about this more after we had the discussion. A lot of people are saying that Kenny Pickett is throwing the ball too much and it's bad for his development. A lot of people are arguing with that and they need to run the ball more. I think that Justin Fields has already had that opportunity to build around the run game. And I think that the Bears need to throw the ball and they need to see what Justin Fields is going to be. This is similar to an argument that I had 2 years ago when I was arguing with people about fantasy football before the show started. When David Johnson got traded for DeAndre Hopkins, it was such a ridiculous trade to me that I was just like, they need to make David Johnson work or else they just look even worse for making that trade.
Well, they sure did.
Exactly. But that's my argument is that they gave up a high second round pick. And if they're not going to throw him the ball, then what the hell were they doing? I don't know if it's something that maybe it's going to take the offseason and then they go into the season next year with him still on the team because he's roster control past this year, that they're going to take a next step then. I think that they made this move with the expectation that they want to see what Justin Fields is. They want to give him the opportunity to throw the ball more. And if he throws it 10 more passes a game, you're taking targets away from those battle of mid wide receiver 2 through 4 for the Bears and giving those targets to Chase Claypool, in my opinion. If he can get 6 to 10 targets a week, I think he has more touchdown upside than Darnell Mooney does. And I think that he could be fantasy relevant if they decide to try and take the next step. And I've been on Justin Fields for 3 weeks now, watching as they were changing the offense for him. He's been better fantasy wise. It's just about, to me, that they need to try to justify this second round pick moving forward.
I mean, he's been better fantasy wise though, because he's had rushing touchdowns in the last 2 games. So it's like, it's not because he's passing better.
Right, but he doesn't have anybody to throw to. In my opinion, now he has a second weapon, and I think that they're going to open the offense up more. That's just my opinion. It could be a complete crash and burn, but Chase Claypool was actually on a lot of waivers in leagues that I've had because he's been very below average, and I added him in all leagues. I think that he's a very good stash in this opportunity. You don't have to start him right away. You can see what's going to happen, but I think that the upside is potentially there if they're looking to try and see what Justin Fields is. They're not going to the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
I think that they should drop back, give him 10 more pass attempts a week, and that little difference could be enough to support both of them.
But will they? Because Minnesota's running away with that division, right. But with so many teams that are borderline 500, does it make sense for them when they're 3-5 and they've had some close calls where they could easily be 4-4, 5-3? Why would they change the offense if it's keeping them in games for the most part? Because as of right now, the Bears, their receivers have 55 receptions and 784 yards on the season.
Because it's not about this year. It's about beyond. Like, is Justin Fields the guy moving forward or not? They need to determine if he's a guy. That's where it's all about to me. I think that they made this move because they want to try and see what the future holds. And I'm holding out hope with him on my bench that potentially he could become something.
Yeah. It's just weird to me that they're like, why wouldn't they just draft George?
I personally think he has a chip on his shoulder. I think that he wants to prove a lot of people wrong because he had a very good rookie year and then he fell off, essentially.
Yeah. It's just weird from like the Chicago perspective. It's like you had 2 second-round picks. Like you passed on Pickens twice.
Yeah.
Amari Cooper was traded for a 5th-round pick. Like, why wouldn't you have been in on any of those?
They screwed up
to take Velus Jones in the third.
Right.
I think they realized they screwed up. I don't
the thing is, I definitely agree that they want to pass more than they have. Yeah. I mean, if you bring in Luke Getsy, the background that he has, which by the way, former Pitt Panther, shout out, but he was the quarterback coach and passing game coordinator in Green Bay. And that's why Jacob was telling me like they are looking for a guy with inside-outside versatility. They're willing to give up this pick for it. Chase Claypool comes into play. I think that they definitely want to throw the ball more. I think the desire is there to prioritize this guy. I'm just skeptical about it working out. I have no doubt that they're going to try to do it.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't think it's going to work out.
That's why I agree with you guys, because odds are it doesn't, because like Fields hasn't shown that he could do it. But I think that if you just sit back and ignore it just because the pass was a certain way is just not how you should handle fantasy football. You should chase that upside. That's why I was all in on Waddle and Hill, because I just felt like the past is the past. They clearly wanted to include those guys, and look at them. They're potentially both going to be top 5. We were talking about top 15. They might be top 5. Like, you have to, in fantasy football, think of what's obviously most likely to happen, but you need to take risks, because if you make a move like this and it pans out, that's a league winning type move. If you end up getting this guy that was on waivers because he was doing nothing with the Steelers, now all of a sudden he's on the Bears and he's getting 6 to 8 targets, he could be like a Victor Cruz when he came out of nowhere, like that situation. Like, I don't think that they were very good passing the ball back then either. Plaxico shot himself in the leg.
I think though, like bringing up the Miami situation, the questions that I had, and I'm assuming for Joe, they had nothing to do with the receivers. It was about Tua. But it was about the quarterback.
It was about Tua.
And
but in this situation with Claypool though, it's my questions are about Claypool himself, questioning the type of player that he is.
Do you think that he has the talent? Like, you don't think he has the talent?
I mean, I don't think he has the talent. I also don't think Justin Fields has the talent. Like, there was no debate in my mind that Tyreek Hill was still a top 3 receiver when he went to Miami. But it was like, can Tua...
Claypool's problems were upstairs, in my opinion. It wasn't physical talent. And if I think that the last few weeks, and I feel like more so this year, he acted like the most mature receiver in this wide receiver room. And even though that doesn't make sense, it still happened. I feel like he learned a lot from all the shit that he took last year. And I think that he's better upstairs. And you're right. It's all about Justin Fields. If he doesn't throw the ball effectively, what I'm saying is going to be a complete dud and he's going to fall off and it's going to be nothing. But I think that they want to try. And I think that Claypool should be rostered because they're making that attempt.
That's fair.
Okay.
I'll take it. Okay. So last profile of the day. Are we all smiles for Kyle Pitts?
Yes.
So Kyle Pitts finally showed up last week. He scored a touchdown, and I actually dropped him last week in one of my leagues and lost pretty much.
I appreciate you so much because if you wouldn't have made that move, I don't think that happens.
Yeah, so he finished as tight end 3 last week. He had 9 targets, 5 receptions, 80 yards, and a touchdown. So are we back on the Kyle Pitts hype train, or was this just a one-hit wonder and he goes back to irrelevancy after that one showcase?
Go ahead.
I'm going to swipe right, and it's mainly because I feel like I have to. I still have so many shares of Kyle Pitts, and I'm not giving up. I'm starting him every week. He was a second-half player last year. I feel like he was very bad beginning, then he had some big weeks later on in the year. I'm hoping that just repeats itself. I actually want to tell you guys, someone dropped Darren Waller in one of my leagues because he's like tight end 24 on the year or something. So I currently am rostering Darren Waller and Kyle Pitts, hoping that one of them decides to figure it out. But I think that this was something to build on. I
don't know. I'm going to disagree with you. And again, I feel like I'm going to say the same exact thing I said about Chase Claypool. They're not throwing the ball. Yeah. I don't think Mariota is good at throwing the football. They are most effective when they're running the ball, and they're in the hunt for the division. They're getting Cordarrelle Patterson and Damian Williams potentially getting back this week. And the percentage of snaps, like he kind of fluctuates back and forth in and out, like around 75% for Kyle Pitts. He only ran 27 routes last week out of a potential 31. I think this was more of an outlier game.
27 out of potential 31. How many pass plays did they do?
31.
28.
Yeah, so he didn't run routes 4 times.
Wait, why does it say Mariota only had 28 attempts?
Yeah, but you could have ran on a couple.
Okay. But you said 31 opportunities. You only didn't run a route 4 times.
Right, but 30 routes a game is like nothing. Like that's bottom of the barrel. So to me, it's like he has to get the routes, then he has to get the targets from those routes. Like it's just not.
Where's the ball going when he drops back? Because not going to Drake London either.
Drake London had 5 targets.
Damiere Byrd
had 6. Kyle Pitts had 7. Algier had 3. Avery Williams had 2. And you have to imagine with Patterson coming back that he's going to get some of the targets. So it's just like, I don't know, man. I don't see it in that offense. I already dropped Drake London, so.
Yeah. Do you think that it's matchup dependent too, kind of like Jonathan Taylor? Because they had a good matchup last week, and that's why he did well.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think it's just a volume thing. He'll probably stay consistently ranked in like that 8 to 10 range for me. But it was just like, I don't really feel great about it at all. Like I'd rather have like Evan Ingram or someone like Greg Dulcich, where it's like at least they're getting the targets, they're a part of the plays, they're throwing the ball in the offense. Like Kyle Pitts, it's just like I feel like when I had him on that team, it was like I had to do something with him because I paid a 3rd round or a 4th round pick for him. It wasn't like I was like excited about it. Like I feel very similar to Jonathan Taylor, but at least Jonathan Taylor has some like points baked in just by being a running back.
Yeah. I've actually been streaming tight ends week over week and just holding them just in case he comes back, which I don't like that.
Yeah.
I'll make this real short and sweet. No. But I feel worse. Like I'm still playing him. Like to your point about Drake London, there's no hope for me for the rest of the season. Like I could see Kyle Pitts having some weeks like last week, 5 catches, 80 yards, a touchdown. I don't see that on the horizon at all for Drake London.
It's crazy to me just seeing there's 2 teams that I thought like for sure would be Tank Commanders, we're not going to try to win a single game, and we're going to go after a big-name quarterback in this year's draft. Atlanta and Seattle. And they are fighting for their lives in their respective
winning their divisions.
And Carolina, too.
Yeah.
Carolina would have been in first place if they won that game.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely maddening to me. Like, I thought for sure, like, all right, like these teams are trying to set themselves up for the future. They're going to get one of those guys, and then they pretty much are in a good spot because they have the talent around it. They're just missing the QB. And I still think, I mean, I won't say that about Geno Smith because he's kind of come out of nowhere this year, but Mariota is clearly not a long-term solution there. Yeah. So it's just like they're playing football in a way that maximizes what they can do with him, which is frustrating, but it is what it is. I don't feel bearish about the long-term success for Pitts or London once there's a real quarterback at the helm, but we'll see what happens.
Zach, what do you think about Desmond Ridder? I feel like you've watched him the most in college. Like, would his play style change anything if he were to come in?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, I guess the question is more about would Arthur Smith let it happen? Because Desmond Ridder as a player is definitely not afraid to let it rip. He's definitely got a better arm than Mariota. And I think that, you know, if we're talking about next year, the year following, like if they actually let Ridder have a shot at starting, I would feel much more comfortable as a Kyle Pitts or Drake London owner. Like I almost wish that Atlanta was in a bad spot this year and just turned the keys over to Desmond Ridder, like in a rebuilding year, to see if there was anything there, because I think that the fantasy value of Pitts and London would go up at least for the season. But not knowing if that's going to happen, and then like them still being in contention and feeling like Mariota's going to play out this season, regardless of if it's working from a fantasy standpoint, they don't care about that. Right. They're still leading their division, winning football games. I think Desmond Ridder would certainly help the fantasy outlook of those guys.
Do you don't think that they feel the need that they have to play Ridder at some point? I eventually think they're going to fall off in the playoff race, personally. Like, we're only halfway through the season.
I would think so, but I'm thinking at that time, fantasy we could be in the fantasy playoffs. Yeah. Right. So,
and that division is dog water.
I know, but they got to look at it and be like, realistically, do they have a chance in the playoffs? Like,
they could have a sub 500 team win that division. That's all I'm saying.
Like, and then get down to the first round is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. All right. Let's move on to Only Fantasy. The only fantasy on the planet. So this segment, we each select one player each week who we feel good about, excited about, are going to subscribe to their success, or if you're me, they don't play or they're usually terrible. We're hoping to right the ship this week. So we will start by introducing our players from the previous week and then explain our new picks for this week. So we'll kick it off with All Reliable, seems to always hit it right on the head, Mr. Drew Hannes. Who you got this week? Spoiler alert.
I have DeAndre Carter, and I don't like it, honestly. Full disclosure, I wanted to go with Keenan Allen, but
I don't like it.
His strings were like, I'm 30 years old. I'm not going to be good again. So there's no Mike Williams. Keenan Allen's going to be out. Josh Palmer's coming off a concussion, and I just actually got an alert like 10 minutes ago saying that he's questionable again. I thought that he was out of the protocol, but he's still questionable. So DeAndre Carter is the only healthy wide receiver in that offense. They play the Falcons this week. Through Joe's chart, you'll see then that they're giving up 57.6 points to wide receivers on average over the last 3 weeks. An absolute smash matchup. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to go with DeAndre Carter.
Who'd you have last week?
I had Travis Etienne. Obviously, that really boomed. 156 yards, 1 touchdown.
In his future home, London.
Didn't rush for 200.
Yeah, he's mid. Honestly, though, with Travis Etienne, the thing I wanted to highlight, the reason why I picked him last week is that I felt that they were going to feature him and they wanted to make it known that he was the guy. They absolutely did that. He had 24 carries last week. He is an absolute must start. I don't care about the matchup going forward. If he's getting 24 carries, he's in your lineup. And that's where I expect him to be the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Cool.
I will do the reverse. I'm going to talk about the guy that I had last week in DJ Moore. The Falcons were just crapping on them today. We
Yes.
just keep talking about them. That's who Carolina played last week. DJ Moore had 6 receptions on 11 targets, 152 yards, a touchdown, and a penalty, which, there's been some conversations about that ultimately led to Carolina losing that football game, I guess, or you could just blame the kicker for missing that kick and the one in overtime for it. But yeah, DJ Moore just absolutely went off. That might be, I know people are calling it the pass of the year. Did you see 65 yards in the air?
Longest
PJ Walker.
air traveled
Like
pass in
2016.
the StatCast era.
Yeah.
Insane. So yeah, with the way that PJ Walker's playing, he's got a vote of confidence from Steve Wilkes. I think that you can just kind of keep rolling that DJ Moore train. I really liked it heading into last week, paid off. This week, I am going to go with a guy very similarly ranked this week for us in terms of running backs to Drew's guy last week in ETN, in Ken Walker III. When it pops up on the screen, you're going to see it says Kenneth Walker. No. This is Ken Walker III, the running back for the Seattle Seahawks, who's absolutely been going off at least 50 yards and a touchdown in 4 straight weeks. I think he's going to keep that rolling. The Seattle Seahawks offense, which I wouldn't have thought is going to have a ton of fantasy impact this year. Man, they got players across the board at positions right now that are just getting it done. So I really like Kenneth Walker III going forward.
Do they usually have that comma there? Is that literally a thing? And I didn't realize that's how they write his name.
You always have to do the comma whenever you're doing the
Yeah, I didn't know that. See, I'm thinking more about life than I am about fantasy because
imagine not having a suffix at the end of your name. Casual.
Unbelievable.
Do you have a suffix at the end of your name?
Joseph John Frick II, baby. Come on, let's go.
Oh, you're a second?
Yes.
I thought that was just like your Game of Thrones thing.
Call me Deuce, baby.
All right. Dropping the Deuce. Go ahead.
And lastly on the show, we always talk about Drew's DFS.
Can I go? Is that cool?
Yeah, like what the hell?
Are we just skipping me to like save this?
I mean,
what am I talking about? Yeah, sorry.
Just skip what you did last week.
Yeah,
sorry,
so last week I picked Raheem Mostert. 14 carries, 64 yards, 1 target, 1 reception for 3 yards. He had 7 fantasy points, finished RB 36.
I tried to save you the embarrassment.
But he did play, which is a step up from some of my other picks that I've had. But You know what? It's a new week. I didn't have clear vision. I had half of my face covered in a mask.
Yeah.
I'm still overcoming some things on the health train. We're getting better. My guy for this week, Scary Terry McLaurin. Had a great Halloween. He's turned it up since Taylor Heineke's been the quarterback for them. So if we're looking at like his target share weeks where Carson Wentz was the quarterback, he was only getting 16% of targets. Since we've had the new quarterback take over, he's up to a 28% target share. I love the matchup against Minnesota. They're the second worst matchup in terms of like fantasy production. So they're giving up 44.2 points in the last 3 weeks on average. I think that Terry's going to have a big game. And I think that he's a lock moving forward in your starting lineup so far, so long as Heineke is there. Obviously, Curtis Samuel was kind of like the darling early in the season. They're still scheming up plays for him, but they really are force-feeding McLaurin. And with Dotson seemingly still not practicing, I think he's going to have a big week. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the points given up in the last 3 weeks. I guess I could pull that up now. Actually, I should probably just pull this up when we're doing this segment because, at least for me, I used Joe's chart a lot when picking my player for the week. And I know Drew uses it to make his DFS. So this is what Joe was talking about when he talks about the production over the last 3 weeks given up by position. That's what this is. And it's, PPR, half point PPR, and standard that he puts out every single Tuesday. And you can see in here, blue, obviously the highest. So very blue means highest. The reddest of the red means the lowest. And obviously stuff falls in between. But there it is, the last 3 weeks. So when he says that Minnesota is giving up the most points, or what did you say? Is it the most?
Second most
points.
So Atlanta's like way outlier. They're like
right, yeah,
midnight blue.
Yeah.
Minnesota's the next one at that 44.2 or 7 or whatever it is.
Yeah. But to carry over, Drew also when he's putting together a DFS lineup will use this chart, and we can talk about that DFS lineup now. Now that I've let Joe talk about his, subscription.
Yeah. DFS lineup honestly is going to change. I had Keenan Allen in it. It looks like he's not going to play.
All right.
So
you should have some cash to play with then.
Yeah, so that's the good thing. So I threw Justin Herbert into my quarterback slot. Typically, as I've mentioned in the past, I don't like to pay up on quarterback, but this matchup is such a smash that I feel like I absolutely have to put Herbert in my lineup. And then I paired him with Keenan Allen originally at 6,500. I'm going to drop that down to DeAndre Carter with 4,300. So that gives me an additional $2,200 to play with, which I would have to poke around with. I think where I'd probably look at is at the running back slot. I have Kenneth Walker in there right now at 6,200. Zach's already talked about him enough. We obviously know that he's been on a tear lately. So he's been a staple of my lineup the last few weeks, and he's paid off each time. Tyler Algier was the running back that I had in my RB2 slot because I had to pay down. He was at 5,400. I thought the matchup was pretty good based on the price point. And his snap share was the only thing that was kind of concerning to me. He's only been hovering around 60% of the snaps there. So they've been in a committee. I just feel like he's had the best opportunity to get into the end zone in terms of running the ball in that offense. So I'm hoping that if I pick a guy like that, I'm hoping he gets in the end zone. But with that money we just saved from Keenan Allen, odds are that's probably where I would adjust my lineup.
And I think that makes sense, especially with Cordero Patterson potentially coming back. Seems like a good move.
Yeah, when Cordell comes back, I still feel like he's going to get worked his way back in because he had a pretty significant knee injury from what it sounds like. They didn't really tell us too much, but they immediately put him on IR. So they knew it was significant enough.
Yeah, and he had surgery too. So
yeah, I still feel like it was probably a meniscus trim, but we still don't know. But a guy like that, I don't think he's going to take on a significant enough workload to take away from Algier right away. At wide receiver for my second slot, after I put in DeAndre Carter for Keenan Allen, I went with T. Higgins, mainly because I feel like they absolutely need to have a bounce back week. Last week, they looked freaking terrible against the Browns last week.
The Browns always have their number. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, they do. I don't get it. He's like Joe Burrow's 0-4 against the Browns for whatever reason. It's been terrible, but they're at home. They have a good matchup. I'm trying
Carolina.
T. Higgins had a 98% snap share last week with Jamar Chase out of the lineup based on player profiler. So if he's on the field, he's going to have the opportunities. He only had 6 targets last week in that terrible game. I expect that to go up. Bounce back week against Carolina. We saw what Kyle Pitts can do, and if Kyle Pitts can do anything against a team, then that means T. Higgins is going to have the opportunity to do anything against that team. And then with my third wide receiver, I went with Terry McLaurin. Zach's already talked him up. It's been pretty good lately, honestly. Like
I talked him up.
Oh wait, Joe, you did Terry McLaurin. Either way,
I mean, I did. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm Smitty the second.
We've been pretty good though lately. Like I've been on the same page with my DFS lineups. I just happen to have the same guys that you guys have been picking for your OnlyFans. The only thing that sucks is that Raheem Mostert cost us some money last week, unfortunately.
It didn't cost me no money.
So Terry McLaurin in the last wide receiver spot. And then at tight end, I'm actually pretty excited about this one. Do you think you can guess who I have at tight end for this week?
Evan Ingram.
Should be Gerald Everett.
It is Evan Ingram. I think I sent it to you, didn't I?
No, you didn't.
Anyways, yeah. Evan Ingram, 85% snap share the last 2 weeks, greater than 75% route participation in all of the last 4 weeks. He had an 85% route participation last week. He's had 10, 6, 7, and 6 targets the last 4 weeks. And the best
one Twitter exchange with Steffi Smalls.
Oh wow.
So big. That's big. That's big. I might elevate. They should have raised his cost for that. He's only coming in at 3,300. I think the Penguins have scored a goal, huh?
That was sick. Zucker. So this is breaking the fourth wall here, but Jason Zucker scored, and because they're wearing the reverse retro pigeons, he took his glove off and did the Yager salute.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sad. I'll have to go watch that.
They call their jerseys pigeons.
We do.
Yeah, it's like a robo penguin. You'll have to see the picture of it, but they're sick. Okay.
Anyways, Evan Ingram against the Raiders, I felt like it's a good matchup. They're giving up an average 19.4 fantasy points per game against tight ends. Gerald Everett's a good point. That's definitely someone I'll have in lineups, especially now that Keenan Allen's going to be out. We saw what he's been able to do, but I made this before I found out about Keenan Allen, so great. And then my flex, I went with Romeo Doubs. I feel like this is a get-right game for the Packers.
I like it.
He's coming off a sick touchdown grab that he had in the end zone last week against the Bills. I think that's something to build off of to get some trust from Aaron Rodgers. 39.7 points per game over the last 3 weeks for the Lions. I feel like that's actually been better than what they were going into like week 5. They were like absolutely atrocious before the bye, but they need to win this week. The Packers do. They're playing in the dome. There's going to be good weather. They've been screwed by weather a couple matchups this year where it was just pouring rain.
Alan Lazard popped up on the injury report as well.
I did not know that, so that just makes it even better. I think I like Romeo Doubs this week, and I think he's underpriced at 5,300.
Sweet.
Defensive one was the Colts. Defense is kind of one of those things where you're looking at their matchup, but you think, are they going to score a touchdown this week? And I think Mac Jones has been kind of mid-Jones, and I could see him throwing a pick 6 this week. Their defense has been
Shaq Leonard.
Yeah, their defense has been kind of brutal though. So this is kind of
I'm calling it right now. You're getting that pick 6, Kenny Moore.
All right, let's do it. Yeah, their defense has been brutal though. So this is I paid down on it that way I can pay up in other positions, Terry McLaurin and such. But
Gotcha.
Hopefully they score. If you get a pick 6, it kind of gets rid of any points that they give. So that's the key. If you don't get a touchdown on defense, you're not going to win in your DFS lineup. So let's just hope for a touchdown.
Got it. All right. Anything else before Joe and I go watch the Pens and Drew goes to watch the Phillies take a 3-1 series lead?
Man, I hope.
Make sure to tip your servers and your pitches.
I like it. All right. But anybody that's watching or listening for the first time, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave us a like, leave us a comment what you want to see, give us a 5-star review if that's possible wherever you're listening to this. In the bio, wherever you are watching or listening to this, you will see the link to 2 different GoFundMes. Our Christmas mission, Rocking Around the 412. Every single year, Tyler and I put it together and give back to the 412 and 724 areas. We've raised over $20,000 in the first 4 years of doing so. Every single penny donated goes directly to these families to provide all the gifts. And also $100 gift card for the family to get groceries to provide the holiday meal. Along with that, you will see another GoFundMe, Isla Keen Fund. She is one of the Rocking Around the 412 kids as well, but she lost her dad last month. She's 2 years old, and obviously there's going to be a lot of financial burden put on that family through this entire process. The GoFundMe so far has raised over $33,000 last that I looked, which is great, but it's going to be up for a while. Just keep it coming in. That family needs it. So anything that you guys can do, we appreciate it. On behalf of Tyler and myself, I know Drew and Joe feel the same way as well. So we appreciate you guys so much. Can't emphasize that enough. And we can't wait to talk to you guys again next week once you get that big, fat dub. Until then, for Smitty, for Drew, for Joe, this has been the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Go Phils.